Hey, LA Progressive friends and family. This is Sharon Kyle sitting here with my husband and partner and the co-founder of the LA Progressive, Dick Price.
Yep.
And we are joined again by Peter Lorman, who is really a dear friend and he contributes regularly to the LA Progressive. He's a retired minister who formerly led Progressive Christians Uniting in Los Angeles. And in fact, that's how we met him. I rarely talk about my faith, but I am a Christian. I'm a progressive Christian, and so is Peter. And Peter has written a wonderful piece that we've published in the LA Progressive. Thank you, Peter. The name of it is Will U.S. Christians Ever Get Past the Antisemitism Tripwire? Hey, Peter, tell us about it.
Right. Hello. Hello. Yes, I'm a retired minister, but not retiring, at least not in that sense. Well, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and actually, I myself have been a little reluctant to write about it because it is such a sensitive issue for Christian leaders who must take the Holocaust seriously, who must take the gravity of anti-Semitism, which is rising seriously. That thing in Australia, for example, a good
Yes.
example, and it doesn't end, and there's no question about it. There's no question about it. And then, of course, I also think it's not unlinked to anxiety about the conduct of the state of Israel. And I want to tread very carefully here and say that doesn't justify murderous violence. It doesn't justify anti-Semitism. But you see that these two things cannot possibly be separated in a way that the current rising tide of anti-Semitism is also fueled by people who are, and they're getting it from, various media sources, who are driven literally crazy by the suffering they see in Gaza and the West Bank. So it's a big, big mess. But what I say about it is um, the fact that Christianity, as such, played a ginormous role in the formation of anti-Semitism in the West, theologically and historically and every other way, doesn't mean that contemporary Christians who take justice seriously should simply shut up or withdraw from conversation altogether when the subject is the conduct of the state of Israel. And you all published this or posted it at the moment when everybody's thinking about Venezuela, and I am too. And I just want to say, I don't think that these two things are absolutely unconnected. And what I mean by that is you have leaders acting with impunity. Benjamin Netanyahu, likes to talk about facts on the ground. And that's what the state of Israel does, in essence, by creating a military occupation of somebody else's country and then slicing it up and restricting access to necessities of life and slowly starving people. And then in the case of Gaza, simply going in and destroying it, right? Destroying it. Or bombing Iran or bombing in Lebanon. We have in the United States a facts on the ground administration the same way as we see this in Venezuela. Only our president, having control of the mightiest military, won't send troops on the ground, and we'll see how that's going to work out. He thinks he can run Venezuela by remote control. I'm somewhat doubtful on that point. I'm not digressing in mentioning this. We're talking about neocolonialism and leaders who act with impunity, and international law be damned.
Yeah, you can't hold Trump to anything. And when he says he won't put boots on the ground, I would take that with a truckload of salt. I mean, he's talking about Cuba's about to fall, and what about Colombia? And hey, Greenland, there's no troops up there. We could take that with a battalion of Army cooks.
Coast
Uh,
Guard.
and so I think it will depend on who pushes back. But to your piece, I mean, part of your piece is wondering why progressive Christians uh, are leery of commenting on the Gaza genocide for fear of being called anti-Semites. But on the other side, the religious right is foursquare behind Netanyahu, Zionism, and how do they justify that?
Well, I wrote about this earlier in the pages of LA Progressive. There's a gigantic number. I mean, it's just a huge, over 25 million American Christians who are um, proudly Zionist, and they say that we're Christian Zionists. And what they mean by this is, according to their reading of the Bible, which is extremely bizarre, they believe that Christ can't come again and rule on earth. These are people described as pre-millenarian. Christ can't come again and rule on earth for 1,000 years until Israel's restored, the temple rebuilt on the Temple Mount, and all of that. And for that to happen, there can't be, Palestinians hanging around. They've got to be, they've got to be expelled. And what they call the Greater Israel, the original King David's Israel, restored. And I make a little note at the very end of my article about how, frankly, hysterical that is, because there actually is not solid archaeological evidence that David's kingdom embraced all this. People forget that the Hebrew scriptures, like the New Testament, is the creation in part of a religion and the creation of a national myth. And yes, it is certainly true that Hebron, for example, contains the graves of the prophets. I mean, that part is, I'm not crazy, that part is true. But the idea that this gigantic kingdom was ruled by King David and therefore it's ours. Do a little thought experiment with me. Imagine if people living in Iran said, well, we know from actual archaeological evidence what the extent of the Persian Empire was
Right.
in the 6th century BC. How about that? Can we have that back? Or if the Greeks said, what about Alexander's empire? We know that was mapped. We know how big that was. Do we get that back? Or what about if Native Americans said, hey, all of this is ours?
Yeah.
U.S. out of North America.
Or Mexico says, hey, we'll take the Southwest.
Thank you.
Goes all
Thank
the
you.
way up, goes all the way up to Colorado and Utah.
Right.
Yeah. But that's within the Jewish Zionist community and the Christian Zionist community, this appeal to the Bible carries tremendous force. And so you asked how that happened. That's how that happened. These people went off the deep end, and their number, Christian Zionists, include, the Secretary of State and a whole bunch of other people in the current regime, which is why, Netanyahu can sleep at night because he's got the backing of the world's most powerful force, and he's got the backing of all. He was a little worried that not only was there the fracture now in the Jewish community about Israeli expansionism, but there's a fracture in the Christian community. My point of this article, the fracture in the Christian community is not nearly good enough because the moderate and progressive Christians are like, oh, we can't talk about this because we will be tagged with anti-Semitism. And I do bring up, and this is important, I bring up this group called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, a very powerful group, well-funded group that is pushing universities and some governments to adopt this nutty definition that if you say anything negative about the state of Israel at all, you're an anti-Semite, ipso facto and anti-Semite. That's really crazy. And the fact that big universities have signed on to this under pressure is horrible, and it's continuing.
So I got follow up to that. So on the other end of the spectrum, you say, and you just said part of it there was that the progressive Christians, of which were a leader and are a leader, are loath to say much about Israel, even while progressive Jews, like the Jews for Peace here in LA, don't hesitate at all to call a spade in what Netanyahu is doing to Gaza. Why is that?
It is peculiar. And at the very top of my article, I say this could be a moment of truth because of this fissure within generational and otherwise within the Jewish community. It is no longer the case that all U.S. Jews are going to jump on your ass if you say something about Israel. That is no longer the case. Now, remember, it's one thing for a Jew to say something. It's another thing for a Christian to say something. And every Christian needs to bear that in mind. Yeah, don't take that as some kind of total license, because guess what? There are anti-Semites among us. There are actual anti-Semites, in some of these demonstrations, and they should be called out. That's the part that breaks my heart. It's not the movement of opposition to Israeli expansionism is not free of anti-Semitism. It's not the dominant strain, but there's just enough of it for people like Bill Ackman and others, powerful people, to say, "Oh, well, they're all Jew haters."
Yeah. So
The Christian thing is complicated because I think progressive Christians, more than any others, understand the roots of anti-Judaism going back to biblical times, going back to the first century, when the group of Jesus followers separated from the synagogues, right? And by the time you get to the last of the Gospels to be written, John's Gospel, the fourth Gospel, you have language in there, even in the mouth of Jesus, talking about the Jews this, the Jews that. Well, come on, Jesus was a Jew. It's very doubtful that he said that, but the editors were already reflecting the dynamic of their time, which was this separation and the bitterness about who actually is chosen by God. Paul, the Apostle Paul, who was a Pharisee, a Jew, is the person who broke the thing wide open and said, we all belong. He never said that the Jewish people, historic Jewish people, wouldn't be in God's kingdom. He says very clearly in Romans 9 they will be, but not everybody heard that, and some people said, "Oh, it's completely switched." That's called supersessionism, right? That's the fancy word for it. The Jews are no longer the chosen people; the Christians are. As the Christian movement became gigantic and spread, you can imagine the anxiety of Jews under this. Like, wait a minute, what just happened, right? And now they're killing us along with the Romans.
yeah. Well, we started this dialogue with early in this conversation. Dick asked, how did it get this way? And then Pierre, you responded by talking about 125 million American Christians have been staunch supporters of the far right. And I'd like
No, I want to correct you. 25 million, give or take.
I'm
That's
sorry,
still a very
25
big
million.
number.
It's a
Yeah.
huge number.
Yeah.
But I want to add another element to that because, of course, I do agree with you that is extremely problematic, and it's what has propped up this current American regime that's leading in all kinds of crazy places. But I want to talk about this 25 million Christians
Mhm.
and how many of them really study the Bible. Because I claimed I am a Christian, and I am a Christian, but I study the Bible. And I don't see their behavior in any way reflecting Jesus Christ. What what
I,
what
uh, I,
foundation do they stand on?
I, 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 uh, someone sent me this speech that Hegseth gave at the Pentagon, where he put on his little, his what he considers his Christian thing, and it's hate, 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 kill them all. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. Uh, these people they're not strictly biblically illiterate. I mean, some of them, if you said to them, what does, Judges verse 4:3 say, they would quote you back. They memorize the damn thing. Um, that doesn't mean that they understand it as a whole. What they do is they pick and choose the passages they like, and they've more or less renounced the Jesus of the Sermon on the Mount. They've renounced the Jesus who says all are welcome, all are beloved, all are sacred, human life is sacred. Love your enemies, bless them who curse you. That's not in their pulpits. What is in their pulpits is make as much money as you can. Nobody's going to take care of you but you. God wants you to be rich. God wants this country to be supreme. God specifically wants white people to be supreme. They don't use those words. But it's an amalgam of, how can I put this, chauvinism, personal salvation, the idea that if that sex is the root of sin, which is a whole subject unto itself. It's been cooking, it's been fermenting on the back burner for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and now in the United States anybody can be a preacher. If I have a point of view, some lunatic idea, I can get myself, I can kind of self-ordain and, start my little TikTok following. Next thing I bought a building, I've got a church, and they're putting the money in, and I mean, it's a it's a it's a it's a pretty weird
Mm-hmm.
thing. The other thing that we can't avoid is while they have been capturing the flag, so to speak, and this is decades long, the sane Christians have been declining. I mean,
Yeah.
it and
Yeah.
they,
Do,
they've been
well, their voices are getting lower, but do you think that they're actually declining, or they just sort of stepping away because what is modeled as Christianity for those who are not Christians is so ugly and so unrelated to what Jesus Christ was about that you almost don't want to claim your own Christianity for fear
yes,
that
there's that.
people will
That's
think
right.
that you're that.
Thank you, Sharon. You say it very, very well. It's all of that. It's all of that. I was at the end of last year. I was interviewing a contemporary of mine who's from the deep South, and his father was a very progressive minister in Louisiana, of all places, in Shreveport, Louisiana. Had a cross burned on his yard. I mean, got the full treatment, but he was still very successful preaching an inclusive gospel in Shreveport, which is one of the more hardcore racist places in the world. And my friend was reflecting on this, and he said by the late 70s, the 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 influence of Robertson and Falwell and the rest of them was starting to seep in, and the idea that all of the liberation movements of the 60s were vile, anti-Christian, crossing lines, women, queer people, anti-militarism, and they got organized on the other side and pushed back hard. We're still in that. We're still in that reaction. I'm hopeful. You said earlier you're hopeful. I am hopeful that that the voice of the Jesus who stands with the poor, who would be appalled at countries invading other countries, will be heard and heard again. But it'll take a while. It'll take a while. It'll take probably beyond my lifetime. But I do see all over the place. I do see younger Christians. They may not use that word even, but I see them showing up. And it's interesting that the middle is missing. The younger ones and the older ones, the middle is kind of missing. But the middle is not altogether lost, because the young people will be in the middle before too long.
Yeah, we know that, boy. You blink your eyes and you're 70 years old.
Yeah, so we are talking today, a day after Trump invaded Venezuela and kidnapped its president. And is there a relationship to the Christianity that supports some of America and what we're doing now with the new Don Monroe doctrine?
Monroe doctrine, yeah. Well, there is, and you know what it is. It's in the minds of people in the base. Trump literally can do no wrong because he's anointed. That's the word. He's been anointed. We don't understand how he was anointed, but he is anointed to do this, and therefore, providentially, it will somehow all work out. I think the uniting theme here is, even before Trump, the world has regressed a little bit with a surge in the very ancient idea. The United Nations was a waste of time. We simply need to go back to how to put this, an understanding among the great powers. And the understanding is China Sea belongs to China, so therefore, Taiwan, the Philippines, eventually Japan should belong to China. The Central Europe should belong to the Soviet Union, and the Western Hemisphere, all of it, from Greenland to Tierra del Fuego, should belong to the United States of America. I don't know, is Greenland even in our hemisphere? Close enough.
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
got to be in the Gulf of America somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, on Trump's anointment, I thought that's what the golden showers in Russia were about. No?
Oh,
So that's a type of anointing, honey, but I don't think that's what Peter's
we're not. That's a different conversation, Dick Price. A little early in the year for that. A little early for that. No, I mean we laugh, but there are plenty of people who feel this way, and by the way, who, uh, for what it's worth, don't want to do the hard work. This is the old authoritarian personality problem. Who don't want to do the hard work of democracy. They just don't want to do it. Just like they want to outsource it. And the most telegenic person who comes along has their voice and their vote.
I've often wondered if maybe there's a little of that in all of us. I think that people who have been marginalized, like myself, I personally feel like I have no choice. I am compelled to say and do something, not just for myself, but for the people who are also marginalized, who are my family. You become a mom and a grandmother, and you can't just sit down and watch this stuff happen. I've often wondered, if I wasn't born into this body, if I had more privilege, would I be as committed to this fight as I am? Maybe it's not fair for me, to condemn those who just sit by and just let it happen.
It is there for you to condemn. Maybe condemn is the wrong word, but invite people to live into their better selves and take their responsibilities seriously. I am trying in this new year to, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do. I am trying to understand how people get to that sort of dead end place, because after all, they become complicit and they become victimizers, but they're also victimized. And luckily, you've got plenty of people publishing your pages who explain that to
Oh, yeah.
your readers, which is why your publication is a lifeline.
So about the
When I read Henry, I can't say his name, Henry
Ah,
Giroux. I'm like,
Henry. Oh,
Henry Giroux, yeah.
so many of the writers, it keeps me going. You, Henry, so many others. Oh, just absolutely.
you've got good ones. You've got good ones on your pages. Yeah.
But on this anti-Semitism tripwire, I mean, that's a terribly effective tool.
Yep.
You mentioned there's a private organization, a foundation trying to equate any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, which is a horrible thing to be accused of for many people. But that's also what the Israeli government does. If you complain that you say that them killing 80,000 Palestinian older men, women, and children was a Holocaust, well, immediately you're branded an anti-Semite. And so people are reserved. They don't say that. And it's like with Trump kidnapping Maduro. Well, what they're saying is the US arrested him. Well, that's not exactly what we did. We went down there and we killed 80 people and grabbed him and stuffed him in a helicopter and kidnapped him.
Right. Under what authority did we arrest him?
Might
No.
makes right.
And well, and the media went right along with it. And we should also say one of the things, the more disturbing and alarming things is there is no longer. I mean, there's Haaretz, which has a tiny circulation, but there is no longer really a free press in Israel or the West Bank. I mean, the regulation of information there is full on. We're not quite at that point yet. In the United States, we do have a very compliant corporate media. but it's not quite that bad. So in this Gaza thing, and for that matter, in the West Bank expansion, it takes a lot to get the information out. It takes a lot to get the information out because Israel is deeply controlling of this. The other thing that's I don't know, ironic is the wrong word, but from the point of view of these tongue-tied Christians, um, sensitive-minded, humanely oriented Jewish leaders for years have said, we're not so sure the Zionist thing is a good idea at all. I mean, going back to the 60s again, Richard Rubenstein, I think it was 1963, wrote a profound book about this. And Hannah Arendt, in her lifetime, who was initially enamored of the Zionist idea, when she realized what the project was in terms of non-Jews, right? The second-class citizenship and the expulsions and stuff. She's like, no, I'm not doing this. Now, if you say that to people who are militant Zionists, they're like, how dare you? How dare you, raise her name in this? But, again, people, this is ideology. This is how ideology works. It's a sorting process. People choose to believe what they choose to believe, and I feel bad because I understand this. I mean, also in my early time in Los Angeles, I was close to the then director of the Progressive Jewish Alliance, which has now changed its name, but it's still around. And he was an attorney, and we went to lunch at a deli in the West Side someplace. And he smiled a big smile, a younger man than me, quite a bit younger. And he said, you got to understand, from the point of view of the Jewish community, Israel, the Holocaust, and anti-Semitism are just one thing. They're just one big molten thing,
Right.
a big emotional thing. Now, that is starting to unravel. And that, to me, is the more because from the point of view of many people, Christians aren't entitled to comment on this. It's when Jews who can't be put down as self-hating Jews, you know that term, who cannot be discredited that way, and particularly when rabbis say enough already to the lawlessness of the state, and enough of the slaughter. That will change this. That will change this. And the idea that Israel will suddenly cease to exist without however many billions in annual support for the United States, that's not true. It's not going to go away. I mean, if U.S. arms shipments ran out tomorrow, Israel buys arms from Germany. They buy arms from a lot of people, and they make their own. They make their own drones. They make the best drones in the world. They're not going away. They're still going to be the dominant power in the Middle East.
And how sophisticated a weapon do you need to go after a kid with a slingshot?
Yeah. Well, one of the saddest outputs of this week, Dick and I went to a dinner party given by a friend around the corner, and she's not Jewish, but her son is engaged to a young Jewish woman, and we were having dinner together, and we got into a conversation about what's happening in Gaza. And she said that she can't talk about it at home with her parents who she adores, but specifically her father. Her father will not engage in a conversation because he calls it anti-Semitism and anti-Zionist, and he blames everything on Hamas. So whatever Benjamin Netanyahu does is fine. And she almost cried, as we were talking, and I just said, okay, we don't have to talk about that. But I could see that division in her family is really hurting this young woman. And I imagine that there are countless stories across this country just like that.
There are. You absolutely know there are. And I know people, a longtime college friend of mine, he and his son, it's a no-go zone. Everything else is good, but it's a no-go zone. So I think, I'll speak my own language. We have to, pray about this. We have to continue to show up and not pretend that just because Trump has stacked a new crisis on top of all the other crises, that the issue of displacement and grotesque suffering in the Middle East and in Gaza in particular is going away. You know, they're restricting access of supplies and stuff. This ceasefire is almost a lie.
Right.
There is a kind of pause, but the aggression and the sacrifice of human life, as Dick has said, civilians, continues.
Right.
You know, and the world is now on to another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, we're going to cheer ourselves up, aren't we, in this new year?
Yes, Peter, we
We
are.
always do.
How are we going to do that?
We'll find a way.
Okay.
We'll find a way.
Well, it's also
We just let them steal our joy. I'm just repeating what someone said to me the other day when I was talking about how awful things are. We will not allow them to take that from us.
No, because if they take our how to put this, take our breath away, take our joy away, they win, right? I mean, they win. I mean, that's part of their goal, is to demoralize us to the point that we simply withdraw.
Yeah.
Well, I must say it's always cheering to me when we get a chance to talk to you from across the country.
Yeah.
We look forward to it.
We do. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again sometime soon.
Yours for happier days.
All right. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.